Hi, I'm Michael Croker, and this is Park Life. I've worked in the Australian theme park industry for a little over 30 years, and in this podcast series, I spend time in conversation with the people inside the business of making memories. Thanks for joining me. I hope you can subscribe, rate, and review. Enjoy the ride. Dion Summergreene is the Art Director of Consumer Products with Village Roadshow Theme Parks. He's a young man that has successfully forged a career inside the industry he loves, working with the brands that have inspired him since he was a boy. He's a published author and somebody who never seems to make time to think what barriers might be before him. I hope you enjoy our conversation as we take a journey through his professional life. Dion, thanks for joining us here on Park Life.
Thank you for having me.
So listen, what is it that you do? What's the title you have here as a part of the Village Roadshow Theme Parks team?
My title is Art Director of Consumer Products, which is essentially developing all of our retail products for all of our Village Roadshow properties, including here in Australia and also overseas.
How long have you been doing that?
I started up in the art studio in 2001. Prior to that, I was actually working in the park on frontline staff in food and beverage and retail. Started actually in food and beverage, like school holidays, and it was like the end of year 11, getting some holiday work. Put me down in the Sundowners in the western area there, flipping burgers and cooking chips and stuff like that, and caused a few oil spills. So I don't think they want to be back in food and bev. But yeah, then went into retail, and then just. I mean, if I can go into it, was basically did a graphic art course when I left school. Kind of left that graphic art diploma. I went for 12 months, left that, and I just didn't feel like it was me. It was more doing, the business cards and flyers and stuff like that. And obviously being artistic, I was just like, this doesn't feel like me. So at the time I was still living at home, and folks were like, you need to go get a job. So I came back to movie world, into retail, into the frontline. I was in the park for a couple of years. And then, it was more just like right place, right time, and manager at the time needed another person up in the retail art studio, which I didn't even know we had here on site, which kind of blew me away that I found out we did all this stuff on site, which a lot of people are quite surprised by. And then, they said, well, we want you to come up here maybe one day a week, just, so after they found out I could draw and I had a design background. And then, after about a month, they said, all right, we want you Monday to Friday. And that was 2001. So it's been a while now.
Wow. If we jump back, what lit the fire in you from an artistic perspective? So what got that kid thinking about being creative?
I think it was probably growing up. I mean, I was lucky enough to grow up in the 80s. So, I mean, it was just, pop culture was just at its prime, and everyone, now it's all coming back again. It's, it's what's, it's driving fashion and, just a whole sort of, just surge of, new fans and things like that, like all the cartoons, the movies. Growing up with all the, the fantastic animation like Ninja Turtles, and I mean, I used to sit in front of the TV and just sit there with my plastic tray with my, a piece of paper and my beanbag and sit there and, drawing away, and even, get things like, even Disney, obviously everyone, all artists are inspired by Disney, and I'd sit there and watch The Lion King just on repeat and on the VHS tape, pause it and draw a scene or draw one of the characters, and being a VHS tape, it always came off pause, so you have to rewind it, find that exact scene. It was definitely being surrounded by all that sort of pop culture, and then just obviously growing up, and I think also working at Movie World, and then realizing how much intellectual property was here and how much there was to draw from. That really just, I mean, I was always a bit of a DC comic fan, but until I came here, then it just sort of exploded for me. Just being, working in the stores and seeing all the characters going past on the Batmobile and all that sort of stuff. So then I really got immersed in that whole comic background as well. So
was art in the house? Was art in the family? Did mum or dad have that leaning? Or
no. Surprisingly enough, there was my brother, mum and dad. There's no sort of art there. I don't even know of anyone else in the family that has that sort of trait. So it was a bit of a black sheep, but a good black sheep, I guess.
Do you have memories of being a kid when particularly Warner Brothers Movie World opened?
I was 91. I do remember coming here when I was very, very little. But then, there's nothing that really jumps out at me. Like, I still remember going down Main Street and going on the Gremlins ride, and which we all miss. But yeah, it wasn't until more when I started working in 90, I think it was like 96. So the park had only been open 5 years. And I thought about the other day how bizarre that was. The park had only been 5 years open, and now it's been, what's it now, 30 years next year. So yeah, but no, it's definitely the characters as well. That was always stuck in my head, and coming top of Main Street and seeing your Bugs and your Tweety and all that sort of stuff. And you couldn't do that anywhere else in Australia, so that was pretty cool.
Did you have an idea as you were going through high school of what it was you wanted to do? Because it seems to me like there was this natural evolution that kind of drew you in, but was there a plan as you were in your late teens and going into the workforce? Did you have an idea of where you'd be?
Yeah, well, I wanted to originally go to university and do animation, just purely because of my drawing background and my love of drawing and illustrating. And then I didn't make the cut with my, the OP back in the day. I'm not sure how they grade your scores now with school, but my score wasn't high enough to get in. I still could have gone in at a later stage as an older student. But yeah, I applied for the animation course at the university and missed out, unfortunately. But I think that was obviously meant to be. And then my path changed and ended up in the world of retail and consumer products, which is, looking back, I think it was probably a great thing.
That's a bit of a stark jump. So you end up in retail. Was that the first line of work, the first division you were working in the parks?
The very first one was like food and beverage.
And what were you doing? You had mentioned that earlier. So
I was just working down in the Wild West Sundowners. I don't know if it's still called Sundowners or Rio Bravo or something like that. The burger joint down there in Wild West. And just working out the back in the kitchen in summer holidays, just sweating like you wouldn't believe. And we're in a little chef's outfit and they're hanging over the oil vats, cooking the fish and chips. And did that for over as a summer holiday, end of year 11, start of year 12, I think it was. So it was like 96, 97. And then came back. I did my graphic art course I finished school in year 1997, did my graphic art course in 98, and then came back here in 99. So
when you're doing the graphic art course before you made the decision to come back into parks, what's the plan there? So you obviously still got an idea of expanding your skills. Where was that designed to lead you?
Yeah, and again, that was when I was doing this, doing the design course. It was more just like, well, let's see where we end up. When you're 18 years old, and you're like, I don't know where I'm going to go, what I'm doing, but I knew I wanted to do something in graphic art because at school I hadn't done any sort of graphic art. Wasn't really available when I was in high school. They didn't really focus on that. This is amazing things that are now. You can do all this stuff online and trade colleges and things. But I was just like, well, I'll give this a go and see where it goes. And that gave me obviously the tools and the basis of the understanding of the programs that are used in the designer space for retail. So that was it was definitely a good jump start.
So how does that kid get noticed here? If we could, I know you mentioned it at the very start, but I just wanted to unpack that. How does that kid come in, firstly in food and beverage, and then I guess comes back in retail?
Yep.
How does that kid get the attention of people internally to demonstrate that he's got this skill set?
I used to get in trouble off the supervisors a little bit, being the kid in the store that, if the store was quiet, I'd done my cleaning, I'd done my dusting, everything was ship-shape, but then so, the old pieces of paper would come out on the counter and, I'd pull the pen out and start drawing and then the staff, everyone used to, oh, can you draw Bugs for me? Can you draw Batman? Can you draw this and that? So I started there was a bit of a collection and then, if you were doing a tea and lunch run, you'd have like Dion's drawings would be in the stores, sticky taped in the back room and there's probably still a few kicking around. But then, they also had a really bad portfolio, like a poor man's resume. And after I found out that they had an art studio up here, and someone mentioned it, and I was like, oh, well, I need to go up and, say hi and introduce myself. And so I went up there with my A4 little, foolscap, dodgy, wasn't even a resume, it was just a collection of drawings that I'd done, just hand drawings with Pantone pens and stuff like that. And, but I think that was very cool because they were able to see that, and there was nothing in there. There was no graphic design, well, very minimal. There was nothing to show that this guy can design products and stuff like that. Obviously, they allowed me to I guess flourish, but they also saw that in me. I think they had the confidence in me at the time. But that was more just me going up saying, hey, look, this is what I do. And they're like, oh, great, that's great, thanks. But that was, and then a year went past with nothing.
Well, let's just stay in that space for a minute. So how does that go for you when you've got this kid that has the courage to walk into the administration building and approach a whole new department with people he's never met?
Yeah.
And he's coming out of retail front of line service role, He's got a foolscap collection of his drawings and knocks on a door. And that must take a little bit of courage, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially when you're younger, you're 18, 19, and I think also it helped being here. Like there was a bit of familiarity, sort of knowing I'd been here for a while, but I definitely didn't know the people in that realm, in that office. So yeah, it was definitely daunting.
And how did it feel when you walked in there and you started to demonstrate or show off your work? Was there no fear about being rejected, no fear about any kind of judgment, just this?
Yeah, I think you're correct. Yeah, I definitely wasn't sort of like quaking in my boots kind of thing. I was more because I think I knew I had a job in the park, and so I think this was more of like, oh hey, this
nothing
is
to lose.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just like this is what I do, this is what I can do, and I'd love to learn more. And nothing came of that initially. It was just obviously they didn't have a space for me at the time, and but yeah, it wasn't until probably a year later then they were like, oh, actually, can you just come up maybe one day a week? We need someone's leaving and there's a space to be filled. So
in that time that happens, in the time between that happening, you don't hear anything and there's no real follow-up for 12 months or so. Was there a sense of, I guess that was for nothing, and I guess I'll give that up?
I don't think so. I think it was. I think I was aware that it was. Again, there was no space at the time. There wasn't a need for another person. So I've always been a big believer in things happen at the right time for a reason. It wasn't like I didn't throw my hands up and go, it's all over. It's just more like, okay, cool, they know, and like I'd still pop in every now and then just to show my face and remember me sort of thing.
Yeah. So with that, when that call comes, what was that was put to you?
Yeah, that was I'm just trying to remember how that looked. It was. I think it might have just been my supervisor at the time saying that they, can you go up and see the guys upstairs? And sat with Mark at the time, and Mario was the head of retail. And they just said, we want to give you the opportunity. And I mean, you can imagine how buzzing I was after that. Yeah. But again, it was only a trial, 1 day a week for I think it was 3 or 4 weeks. And then obviously, they sort of sat around the table and had a chat about it, and all right, let's give this kid a chance. So, and that was the best break I could have ever got, and like over the years, people are always like, you've been here for so long, should move on and look at other things, and just like when you look around at all the properties and the characters and the people and everything, and I was like, no, this is some pretty cool stuff we do here.
I've never got that, because I've heard that over the years myself, and people say, oh, you're still there, and why haven't you gone out and done other things? And I think, to your point too, if you're evolving and being stimulated and challenged in an environment or in a universe that you're already existing in, then there's no need.
No, 100%, and I'm still learning like every week. There's always there's new people in the team, and now also being surrounded. We're situated in the marketing arts studio, so again now that opened up a whole new door again. Myself and Josh, who works with me. Being surrounded by all the marketing creative, it's just that's the next level again. And listening in and picking up stuff, and being under the guidance of Richard, and he's the head of the creative for marketing. And I've picked up a whole bunch of new stuff as well. Constantly, I mean, when you start to get stale, when you start to hate getting up in the morning and going to your job, that's when you start looking. Everyone has rough days, and it's just natural. But I still come in and love what I do. So,
what's one of the first projects for that kid got when he was putting his toe in the water and they're giving you a break? What did they throw you? Can you remember one of the first projects he got?
Yeah, it was actually it was a lady's shirt. It was a Superman lady shirt. So it was the Superman logo with the American flag through it. Just a pretty simple classic one like that. And I still remember doing the legal line on it. And that's one of the things is you do your design and stuff like that, but there's lots and lots of details you got to worry about, like all the legalities and the trademarks and everything's got to have the TMs and the registrations and stuff. And I still remember the legal line was 2001. It's always stuck in my head because when did you start in the art studio? And I always think back to that first sewing label I did on the neck label. There was that, and of course it was they just back when I first started, they just put me in the sense that here, this is how it all works. Here's all the style guides. This is all the characters. This is our library of here's your Scooby-Doo, here's your Looney Tunes, and so open up the files, and they're all black and white. So you have to color them and make sure all the colors are right. And so they gave me a good couple of weeks of just playing with that and stuff like that, and just sort of eased me into it. And then it was kind of just off and racing. And
can we stay in that space for a moment for people that maybe aren't aware of that process that you have to follow? That's obviously new for you at that time too. So let me know if I'm getting this wrong. So effectively you're told, here's the palette, here are the colours, here's the brand or the intellectual property, the IP, and so these are your paints. And here's your canvas. So let's say the canvas is it's a t-shirt design. Are you then left to your own creative devices with a preset kind of brief to then make creative choices of how to bring that IP alive in that form, whether it's a t-shirt, whether it's a mug? Is that how it works? You're given those tools and then given the freedom to run?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's and then now it's evolved. The process has evolved over the years. As we've sort of grown and we've dipped our toe into more fashion space in the last few years, and that's again learning so many more things there with the whole technicalities of the background of garment development and whatever, everything that goes into it. But yeah, from the get-go, that's exactly correct. Is they're like, okay, we need a t-shirt. It needs to be like a Scooby-Doo boy shirt. If there's a particular theme they're after, it could be for Fright Nights or for Cool White Christmas or something. But yeah, we definitely get given the freedom and from the design point of view to also then see what's current out in market. What are people buying? What are they wearing? And then back in the early days, it was pretty much everything was given to me in a brief. Obviously, and then that was a junior designer. Now being the art director, that obviously falls a lot back onto myself and Josh that works with me, and Lisa from a quality assurance point of view, and then Jolene is the merchandise manager. So it's a big melting pot of stuff, and then all that gets sort of put. Jolene will brief it in to myself and Josh. Then we go, okay, cool. Like I was saying, we'll go out. We do a lot of market research. We'll go to the shopping centres. We do a lot of stuff online, just always looking, what's the latest trends, what are the fashions, what are people buying, what are they wearing.
Right.
But yeah, we've got with Movie World and SeaWorld, particularly Movie World, it's all licensed. Everything in Movie World is licensed, so everything has to go to Warner Brothers for approval, everything we do. Each stage of development, so the design gets approved, and then we get a pre-production sample that gets approved, and then we also have to send them final approval of the final product. So it's a long process. It's about, we allow about 6 months from start to finish. SeaWorld is the same with Nickelodeon properties over there, but we also have freedom with SeaWorld and the other parks where we can create our own characters, essentially our own licensed properties, all the sea creatures and things like that. So that when we develop those products, it's not as long because we don't have to go through another party to get them approved. We just, if we're happy with it and if we think that's going to work, then we run with it. So, but yeah, with the licensed properties, there's a lot to take on, especially when it comes to all their colours and size ratios, and don't put this character with this character, and it's and then it's fun too when especially they're always bringing out new properties, and Warner Brothers brings out new movies. Same with Nickelodeon, or they're bringing out bring out new TV shows, and when the Shimmer and Shine came along, we're all like, well, who's Shimmer and Shine? What do these girls do? So we've got to immerse ourselves in that, and sometimes my family are like, what are you watching? And I'm like, I'm doing research.
Yeah, that's great.
I've got to design stuff, so I've got to figure out what this show is. So it's a preschool show with little genies, but it's you got to get it in that world and see what
understand it.
Yes, and what makes it appealing and what to pull out of that and put on a piece of product.
Was there a period where you really knew and got a sense, I think I've got a career here now? Was there a time when you kind of knew, even unconsciously, I think I've got a career here, rather than I'm taking a shot?
I think it was probably when I was doing more stuff for SeaWorld, creating, I just touched on it, creating new characters and like drawing and illustrating characters that never existed before, for sharks and dolphins and, turtles and clownfish and all that sort of stuff.
Let's talk about that for a sec. So that, I think that's important. That's obviously a key point in your career, right? Where you're now entrusted to create the universe, create the color palette, create the canvas, and work within that. So that was obviously a clear sort of point in time where you really believed, there's a validation here and an awareness of what I can bring. Yeah,
I think so, especially when you're creating original characters. And when you were doing, back then it was like Powerpuff Girls and Ren and Stimpy and all that sort of, way back in the that sort of late 90s area. It's different when you're doing licensed stuff because that's tried and tested. There's a show that has the support of people. But when you're creating brand new original characters and that goes onto a product,
there's no fan base that's waiting.
Exactly, yeah. And people are spending money on that sort of stuff, and then you see them out in the real world outside the walls of the theme parks wearing this stuff.
Yeah.
That's a real kick. That's when you realize, okay, cool. I think I've got a career as a retail artist or graphic artist.
The confidence comes up.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny over the years too, creating original characters for especially SeaWorld. I wouldn't say it's ad hoc, but you do it like a dolphin girl's bucket hat. So you draw up a dolphin, and a couple of years later we're like, oh, we need to update that dolphin cap or a dolphin shirt. So you do a different dolphin, and because your style is always evolving, your artistic style or any sort of whatever art realm you're in, music or art, and your style's always changing. So over the years, I go into the SeaWorld shops and see. I'm like, I cringe. Like I see a shirt from like 5 years ago. Oh man,
and that's not the artist you are today.
No, exactly. Yeah. And then even again over until like a few years ago, and so.
But it's funny as you say that. Musical artists I'll often hear will talk about not wanting to go back and hear early recordings, or will cringe at early demos of songs and think, if only I knew now, could take back what I know now to then, and really do that differently. But it's relative, right? Because you're at where you're at the time.
That's your skill level, and
But that's interesting, because I think that's a universal part of the artist's journey. That you're constantly able to look back at the work and think, I could see that would be better if I could do A, B, or C.
And there's still a couple, probably minimal. There's a couple of pieces I still at SeaWorld that sell really well. Yeah. So that's one of those things of if there's a good seller, they hang on it. But everything obviously needs updating at some stage. So I do see sometimes I walk in and see, and I go, there's that Shark Bay hat that makes me cringe. But that was a launch pad for wanting to. That was, I think it was one of the moments in my career where I went, okay, cool, I've got a target this year. It was probably, was it 2016 or 17? Again, because I walked into the SeaWorld stores and I would see all these different, renditions of seals and dolphins, and I'm like, it all looks cool, but it doesn't create a strong brand. Like it's not a one cohesive, story. So there was a target for myself for like a mission was to create a style guide essentially, which hadn't really created, hadn't existed. They did have characters way back in the 80s, and that was essentially a style guide, but that had sort of gone forgotten. And
so that's interesting. For those that don't know, can you just describe what's the purpose of the style guide? What does that do?
Yeah, it's essentially your go-to. It's your Bible for everything. If it's around a show, or a movie, it's has everything in there from creative inspiration. Has all the characters, whether it be photographic or vector illustrations. Then it'll also have like product examples of how you could apply these characters to these shirts. I have like patterns and expressions and graphic lockups and all this sort of stuff. All your tools are in there, so you can pull that all apart and create a design. Sometimes there's existing designs in there that that the licensee has already created. You can just plonk and place them on a and you always joke, just so you get old plonk and place on something, copy paste. But other times we can really grab this element from here, that element from there, and create our own sort of graphic design essentially. So that's something like that hadn't really existed for SeaWorld, and that was my mission, that I wanted to create something where if I was to step away, then someone could step in and then go, okay, cool, like there's a range of characters, there's a range of colors, here's the elements and backgrounds and patterns, so that story would continue, and it probably needs updating now, or even not updating, probably just adding to it more characters, and because it's a lot of work, when you're creating characters and doing different poses and stuff like that. But it turned out really, really well, and and we're still using those guys and on apparel and products now. And right at the time was when we did the Castaway Reef at SeaWorld, and it was sort of just right timing. I didn't even know that was kind of happening. I finished this style guide, and it just sort of became into existence. And and at the time they were like, wow, this is amazing. We need to use this for SeaWorld. We're doing Castaway Reef, which blew me away, because basically we took a bunch of those characters and turned them into giant 3D sculpts, and where they're existing now at SeaWorld, where the kids can run around in the splash pad, and I've taken my kids there now, and and I get to tell them that that's what Daddy created, and
those characters are literally in the world. out of your mind, which is amazing.
They're real, they exist, and I got to work closely with Sculpt Studios on that stuff, and so seeing that go from a 2D drawing, or even just out of my mind, it was a pencil drawing, I vectorized it, then it became a little colourful character, and then for them to turn into a big giant foam mold, and then fiberglass and colour it, and water spouting out the top of it, and to go to see that when it was all finished was that was a very cool moment.
That's fantastic. Was mentorship a part of your journey as you evolved in your career? Did you have key people around you, or were you kind of left to your own devices? Was there any one or two people that you kind of think, I'm really glad that person was at my side?
Yeah, I definitely in the early years in the art studio, my boss at the time was Mark Campbell, and he taught me a lot on, showed me the ropes essentially with all the, in the product development world. And then after that, it was, I was definitely sort of just picking up bits and pieces of my own, but definitely managers that have come along also, that I've taken lots from them as well, from especially from a financial point of view. And everyone jokes, I always say, I don't do numbers, I don't do maths. I was in the bottom maths at school, but that's something, as I got older and started learning from my managers, took that on board. And because that's what obviously makes retail tick. That's the proof in the pudding. That's data. That's facts. Yeah. If something's not selling, then there's the black and white right there.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because I think for me also it's a unique part of what we do. There has to be two parts of your brain going at once, and sometimes in tandem, and sometimes they have to separate and act independently. Right. So there's the creative brain that needs to play and run out and be wild sometimes, and then there's the other part of the brain that needs to be commercially orientated, business focused, measured, calculating, has comprehension of the numbers and the return on the investment being made with the creative. You obviously began life pretty much as a creative to begin with, and I think for a lot of creatives that can be a challenging thing to say, well, I need to get this other part of my brain going. It might be something that they're not able to do. It is a unique skill set to be, I think, able to jump between the two. Did that take time for you to get a handle on that, or did it come just as a matter of learning, just being in the job and finding out as you went?
I think it was more so when there was a restructuring the team, and Michael Parker is our head of retail, and the way it was structured was, myself and Jolene was the merchandise manager, I was the art director, so we all kind of were in this sort of realm of, and then feeding straight into Michael, and that's when I started picking up a lot more. We'd have our meetings. So I was included in these roundtable meetings of, from a design point of view, and and then from Jolene from a planning point of view. And so we had all these sort of, heads around the table. Excuse me. And that's when I started to get a feel for the figures and sort of really, I guess, deep dive into that sort of world, which has definitely helped. I mean, you can't not be in that world if you're doing art direction and product development and planning ranges of stuff that's for a new movie that's coming out. You're not going to go and design something that's going to bomb. You need to look at the what's worked in the past, but also what's trending now and also what's coming. So definitely. Thankful for that experience as well of, and I'm still in that realm as well, talk to the commercial guys and, get all that data and, from all of our different, demographics, from international, not so much at the moment, but, interstate. And even I was chatting to Michael the other day about how, with this whole COVID situation, it's interesting to see, we had to get some hard data on what just our locals are buying, because, what are our hardcore locals buying? And that's because there's been no interstate travelers, there's been no international, so we get a good look, a good snapshot of just exactly what people in our area are buying. So we can see that it's lots of kid stuff's selling really well, and so we go, okay, cool, Looney Tunes is really working well, so let's focus more on that. Let's hone in on Looney. DC stuff was exploding, it always will be, but that's sort of taken a little bit of a back seat, surprisingly. So just not. I don't mean to slow down, but it's just like Looney Tunes has sort of started to go up, and we feel that mums and dads are coming out and spending stuff for their kids and making experience for their children. So so everything's that landscape's always changing. So it's always good to be around the people that know that. So
you're dealing with intellectual property, some of the biggest IP in the world, obviously out of the Warner Brothers pool, the DC stable, Nickelodeon and so on. Was it ever daunting for you? Was there ever a project that you went into thinking, okay, wow, this is not only very cool because I'm a pop culture guy and I'm a fan of these brands as well? Was there one particular project that sticks in your mind where you just thought, I can't wait to get my teeth into this creatively?
Yeah. Probably would have been Batman Begins. That was probably the first film I ever worked on for a product development point of view to support with retail. That one to me, because again, being a massive Batman fan, that was that was the first film, because that was 2000 and, well, I'm going to test me now. When was it? 2007, around then maybe.
Around then.
But I know the previous was like 95 or 97. It might have been Batman and Robin, and that universe kind of went away for a while.
Yes, it did.
And George Clooney apologises for it. But yeah, so the fresh take on this movie, this character, was amazing. So to be able to give him a style guide, we're going, here's the new Batman, and like go away and do stuff. And it wasn't so daunting. It was more, really exciting.
That seems to be a key thing with you, and I just want to, stay on that for a moment. You seem to be fearless right from the very outset. Fearless at the point of being the kid that's at home drawing and maybe not surrounded by co-creators. Fearless in, you talked about, not being maybe a great student with math, for example, but fearless in, okay, there's a business to the creativity of doing what I do. I need to understand that. Let's dive into that. Fearless in walking up to a room in a place you've never been and knocking on a door and saying, here's some of my drawings. I'd like to get your attention. And here you are as a fan of a particular brand, and out of the US, the owner of that IP is through different channels coming and saying, okay, you now have the keys to the Batman franchise.
Yeah.
Show us what you would do.
Yeah.
And you don't shy away from that. Like you said, I wasn't afraid, I wasn't daunted. If anything, I was excited.
Yeah.
It almost seems to be you're unconsciously fearless rather than even pushing fear away.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I try and I think it's more excitement that drives me.
Yeah.
I think the excuse me. I think it's the excitement sort of overrules the level of unknown. And I know with when we did Lionsgate, as you know, you were heavily involved. That was daunting. That was more, the daunting overtook the excitement a little bit on that one, just because it was developing for 6 or 7 different IPs in a different country, being China, and so we were developing retail products for a completely different country, where we were like, okay, we need to figure out, what are people wearing, what are they buying over there, how are we going to tie these properties into those fashion pieces, especially things like the Gods of Egypt, and there's some strong ones, obviously, like Twilight, Hunger Games. Those ones were obviously, I wouldn't say they're easier to do, but they were a bit more, workable. Yeah, you could sort of massage that onto products where, with the other a bit more sort of left field ones, like Escape Plan and Gods of Egypt and things like that. So, so we did a bit of R&D, quick whirlwind trip in China, just to basically go over there and people watch and look in the stores and try and get our sort of R&D, research and development, sort of brains on, and lots of photos, and and bring all that back, and then go, all right, how do we skin this cat? And
you seem to be very good at not getting in your own way, and a lot of creators have a problem with that. They'll overthink themselves into a paralysis sometimes and can't find a way out. You don't seem to do that instinctively. You don't seem to get in your own way too much creatively. Would that be accurate?
Probably, yeah. I think it's also the team you have around you. That's a big part of it. Knowing that you've got some really strong key team members around you that that they don't help you. They're working with you side by side. So you can help. You lean on them. You rely on them, and that's what I said. You've learned so much. So Josh that I work with, I've learned so much from him from a technical point of view. He's a whiz on all the programs, and some of those we can go down a rabbit hole. Just trying to he'll be showing me things like that, and sometimes go, oh, we don't have time. We got to get this out. Got to this has to be done. But if you can just focus on it, and take time to learn some tools. That helps as well. That gives you a bit more confidence. But yeah, it definitely. I don't think I get my own way, and creatively. Sometimes, you just got to sit back and sort of, it's a lot of work, but you also got to let it flow as well, and try and just have confidence in your past experiences, and just have that faith that you're going to create something that people are going to want to buy.
I often say to creators, if I'm working with them outside of being in the parks and working with young actors, for example, that your birthright is you were born fearless. So we come into the world fearless. So that's why one of the reasons the human race continues to move on. We're born into the world with a sense of fearlessness. So kids naturally dream big. They'll tell you all the things they're going to do when they grow up, and they're all these big, bold ideas because they haven't learnt yet that I'm going to get afraid and I should maybe self-doubt, and maybe I'm not as good as that person next to me, and maybe I'm not as smart as that person that was sitting across from me. And we take in all this noise, and the noise then gets in the way of letting you come through. So I'll often work with young actors and through a series of exercises get them to kind of peel back those layers of learned anxiety and self-doubt and inner dialogue that isn't maybe healthy, and let that inner confidence that's already hardwired in come through. I get the sense listening to you, you've just instinctively and naturally somehow along your journey not ingested a lot of self-doubt, not ingested a lot of fear from the outer world, and kind of maintained this healthy self-awareness and truth about what you want to do.
Yeah.
And that's not easy for creators to do, because usually creators are emotionally vulnerable and open, and then because of that, stuff can get in and kind of pollute the waters. But listening to you, I mean, there's a thread there of just being fearless. How does this guy do what you've done just recently? Because we should just mention you're an award-winning designer. You've had a series of brass ring awards, which are our industry's Oscars, awarded to you out of the US for some of your designs. Let's just touch on that real quickly before we jump into some of the other stuff you've done. What's that feeling like when you take away recognition from your peers out of a completely different country who recognise on a global level the quality of your work? What's that like?
That's probably the highlight of the career was being on that, like you said, international stage, being recognised for the products that we've put together as a team, and over the years there's been all sorts of products that all different designers have worked on, and and to be able to there's some out here in our admin on display that I walk past those each day, and I see Chrissy's Tweety jumper there still sitting there on display from a few years ago, and but to know that we go up against the heavy hitters like Universal and Disney, and to compete in the realm with those guys, and to be able to take out awards of developing product that is, not saying it's better than theirs, but a bunch of like you said, peers have gone, all right, we think this one is worthy of best apparel, international, or best plush, plush toy design and stuff like that. And that also that's a big driving factor as well when I think subconsciously, it's not so like, oh, this is going to win an award. We joke about it sometimes. We do some cool stuff like, oh, that's an award winner right there. That's it's an IARPA submission. But the first thing is obviously is someone going to want to buy this? Is that what's I'm not just creating a product, you're creating a memory. I know it sounds a bit kitschy, but that's what it is. You're creating. You want someone to be able to buy something and take it away, and then for someone to say, oh, where did you get that? That's really cool. Say, oh, I got it at SeaWorld or Warner Brothers Movie World or Paradise
Do you think
Country.
that's easier for you because you're a brand fan as well? So there's almost a part of you that can look at what you would like to see on a shelf because you're a fan as well. So you can
100%.
almost put yourself in the shoes of a guest and kind of know if you are into Aquaman, Wonder Woman, you're going to be into this.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing, yeah, exactly. And that's where I think being a massive fan, being a giant nerd helps as well. Especially when it comes to things like DC, and there's a big Wonder Woman 84 product range dropping very shortly for the film that's going to come out at Christmas time, and there's some stuff in that is again we're like excuse me, what is going to drive people to spend their money on this, and it's something that's bespoke. They're not going to be able to get it anywhere else in the world. That's the thing that drives us as well, that we're creating original pieces that you can't get anywhere else in the world.
And just in that, really quickly, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think it's important. I remember seeing the joy in you, this childlike joy in you, when you had collaborated with WB/DC and introduced a limited edition piece for the park. And Jim Lee was connected to that, who of course any Batman fan will tell you a lot about, or any DC fan. Can you just tell us a little bit about that experience? Because that's a big deal for a kid that was dreaming big and then is suddenly being ordained with a project is ordained by the great Jim Lee. Tell us about that.
For the 80th anniversary, for the we did a Batman collector coin. That was I think it was Dwayne's design, that guy.
Yeah.
And that was for his 80th anniversary last year. Excuse me. But I'm working with Warner Brothers. They're so open and willing to collaborate on things like that, and especially with Jim Lee. I mean, he's the cream of the crop. He's the man for DC. And he's one of my legends as well. So I look up to him massively. But to be able to create, it was it's a collector coin, which is a great piece in itself. But then to be able to ask Warner Brothers, to see if Jim Lee would be involved in signing these pieces for us, then to be to give them away as awards to guess, and he was more than happy. Had a photo with it, had a photo with the product and things like that, and for him to see that and obviously admire the product we've done, and happy to put his name literally on that product.
Wow.
That was very cool. And as similar was when we did the 20th anniversary piece of art. That was another time in my career where that was very cool because with the licenses, sometimes there's sort of those sticky areas where you can't have Looney Tunes with DC Comics appearing on the same piece of art just because of the licensing issues. But this time, for 25th anniversary for a movie or something special, so just tried to piece together a montage of all the characters in our park. So obviously separated, tastefully with a film strip kind of deal, or a big 25 in between them, and but to put that piece of art together, an original piece of art that Warner Brothers and DC Comics and all the people over there were happy to sign off on. There was a couple of little tweaks to it, but they're like, what, this works. We think, definitely go for it. And since then, that's the first time that we've ever done that in our park. To be able to have those characters together, and it looks so good too. All those properties sitting together in one piece of art.
For sure.
And now that was a massive, hit for us. And so now, going forward, we do that again. We've done another montage piece with all the characters together. So that's just one of those things where you're not sort of like breaking the ceiling, but you're just sort of like trying to opening the window a bit more and just trying to collaborate more and like I said before, the WB guys are great to work with, and we try and do that when there's a new film or we create something. We see if one of the stars of the film can be involved, and we had Aquaman. We had Jason Momoa sign some hats for us. The same thing that went in for a competition, and just there's like spoiler alert. There's some exciting stuff coming up with Gal Gadot for Wonder Woman. So watch this space with that.
That must be pretty cool when you know that the guy that's playing Aquaman has got one of your Aquaman hats in his hand, putting a signature on it.
Yeah, and he loved it so much. Actually, we sent five over. Sent it to went from our supplier in China, went to and this is great. Everyone made it happen. There was a big team of people that went from our supplier, because it still was, still wasn't even on the ship coming to us yet, to the park. It was still being made. So the hats went from China to LA to DC Comics guys took it from LA over to New York, where Jason Momoa was in one of the Comic Cons over there. All the representatives got him to sign it, and he actually, I'm not sure if he had his kids with him, one of his kids, but he loved the hat so much that we created, he kept it for himself so he could give it to his kid. So we're like, they said, oh, Jason's kept one. I'm like, that's fine. That's fine. He can keep one of those hats. So
that's fantastic.
That's cool when the star of the movie wants to keep something. Like, that's cool. We've designed something cool.
Not bad for that young kid that's flipping burgers one day years ago as a casual employee,
causing oil spills
and having to clean up after himself.
Yeah,
pretty impressive. We should just mention, outside of the theme park business, and again, I think you're a pure creative, there's obviously a lot in you that has to come out and you kind of channel that through. You're the author of a book, and look, I've been working on a novel that I started writing over a decade ago, and I still haven't got it out because I've been in my own way for a number of different reasons with that. Is it good enough? Should I go back, do a rewrite? And while I've been talking about that and doing it, and not actually pushing it into the world, you've gone ahead and done that, and you're a published author. Tell us about what that is and how that came about.
I think it was again, like you said, it's a creative outlet. just something completely separate from work, and where else I could channel, so, and again, like have a stab, have a crack at something. And that was when my daughter was still very little. Our son hadn't come along yet, and I'd started because I was up at all hours, obviously with a new baby, and like, I'm awake, I'm not sleeping, so I'll jump on the laptop and start. It was like the way it initially started was I, being obviously in the world of animation and licensed properties, I wanted to try and do the pitch of pitching a animated show. So I bought the books of how to create the perfect pitch and all that sort of stuff. So I started reading up on all that, how to create you got to obviously outline a bunch of different episodes, and you want to take an idea to someone. They go, well, how can you make this work across 13 episodes? And so I started doing that, and then walking my daughter in the pram, and think of different ideas, and after a while, I came up with an idea about a detector dog. It was like a quarantine situation with all different animals, so always different animals coming and going, and so each episode would be a new animal's arrived in the quarantine, and how does that interact with Buckley, who's our focal character. But after a while, I thought, I think I could maybe turn this more into a book instead of an animated show. And I, again, hadn't written a book before, and I've always been good with creative writing, but and hadn't written a book, and structurally and all those bits and pieces. So I started doing it, and then I got down, down a path a little bit with a couple of chapters, and then, sent it out to a friend's mum, just to have a look at, and she passed on an editor friend, and she published a book, so she passed on an editor like, hey, can you just help this guy out and have a look? Is he on the right path? Is he, or is he just going down in flames from the get-go? And she's like, oh no, this is really good, and she had a couple of good pieces of advice for me. So I'm like, but 90% it was good feedback. So I'm like, cool, I feel confident. So I just kept going with it, and but yeah, it was basically it's the story of Buckley, who's a detector dog at Brisbane International Airport. He uncovers an international smuggling ring operation, and so he comes across one lone survivor from a smuggled shipment of these exotic animals. And so he's everything in him is saying, do as you're told, be obedient. But he feels so bad for this little creature, this little chameleon. He takes it on himself to try and get her back home, and back to so obviously the adventure unfolds of him sort of smuggling himself out of his own country with his best friend Bo, a mouse, who lives in the airport as well. But yeah, so they go on a bit of a crazy adventure and overseas, and trying to find her family, and also so Buckley, being a detective sniffer dog, he wanted to try and uncover the obviously who's behind this whole smuggling ring and put a stop to it. So, and it was good. So it shines a light on that very seedy sort of business of animal smuggling, because it's such a it's so just dire to our extinct our endangered animals. And it was funny, it sort of all came around this whole time of, all the quarantine and everything that's like kicking off with, COVID and stuff. And I even saw a thing on TV the other day saying that detector dogs could be used to detect, COVID in people. So there's, and, in going down that path, and I spoke to Trevor Long at SeaWorld, when I was writing the book, and, speaking to some key people about, quarantine things, and, again, learning so much, and, researching, all the things that happen behind the scenes at airports and things like that. So yeah, that was a good.
Fearless, mate. Fearless. That book's in the world. Can you tell us in what form?
Yeah, it's on. You can get it on Kindle, and it's also on paperback, digital and paperback. It's through Amazon. It's Buckley's Unexpected Adventure.
Do you get feedback from readers?
Yes, I do. Yes, and that's also too with the when we first launched the book, and I must shout out to my wife, who was amazing. She went through and she became my publisher basically, because I sent off to a bunch of different publishing houses, and and it's the old story, of like, oh, thanks, it's not what we're after right now, and my wife was like, hey, look, this is a big task, but if I'm willing to take this on, did you want to should we jump in and publish it ourselves? And I was like, well, yeah, sure. Like, then it's a big undertaking, especially, I had the benefit of my wife also being graphic design, and she's also got the background of marketing and all sort of stuff. So when you launch your book, it's a expensive outlay. But I was able to design the cover. I was doing and my wife was doing all the web stuff, and so we were able to pull our own resources there. But yeah, so she was amazing in pulling all that together, and just doing all the editing and things like that. But yeah, so yeah, we decided to launch it ourselves, and take a chance, and it's out there now. So I bet you were saying about feedback. When we first released it, we were, on Amazon, and especially with Amazon, it's all with marketing. The more you advertise, the more you sell, obviously. And obviously, and we went through a stage where we were like putting a lot of money into the marketing, and then we had to back off a little bit. But when we were putting money into the marketing side of it, we were getting lots of sales, and there was lots of really amazing positive feedback.
Can you recall any feedback that you kind of stepped back and thought, that's what this is about?
One of that was probably more of a common comment that I kept picking up on all the feedback was a lot of people were, again, being a massive Disney fan and living in that world. Again, this least it takes you back to when you're a kid sitting in front of the TV.
Dreaming.
Watching all these, creations and storylines. And all these people were saying, about probably 4 or 5 times I read the same comments, like, this would be an amazing, like, Pixar-like movie. And as I was writing the book, this is exactly what I had in my mind. Is how I was visualizing it. I could see the characters and the music and the scene and all that sort of stuff. So to people to pick up on what I was feeling, that was to me like validation that like that's cool. I mean, hey, it's not just a Pulitzer Prize or anything like that, but people related to it and they took something away from it as well.
That's fantastic. I always try and wrap up with the same 2 questions. So I'm just curious, if you look back at your career, and I'm sure there's many, and we've touched on them here, is there one particular moment that you just think, I'm really proud of that?
Probably what we just touched on before was, one of them was, probably a couple. It was probably the SeaWorld water park. That was probably one of those wow moments, especially I think because my kids were involved in that picture in regards to interacting with it. They wouldn't have taken, if they weren't around, it wouldn't have taken any sort of grandeur away from it. But to see, it was my daughter at the time when we first opened, for her to see her run in and pointing and saying, "My daddy did this and my daddy did that." That was the heartstrings pulling moment. And also being present at an IAPA presentation in the States, with my boss, being able to go up and accept an award and stand there and physically put that award in my hand. I think it was 2 we won back to back there, and and to be able to be around all those people in that industry from around the world was again another pinch me kind of moment. So I picked 2, not 1. So.
No, that's great. That's great. What still drives you after all these years?
Probably constantly learning as well. I was saying earlier is just always and learning new skills, just new ways of attacking new products, but also we're in the business. We're lucky enough to be in the business. There's always new content, so we don't know what's around the corner. What's the next movie? What's the next what's the next show? What are we and then the collaboration with everyone creatively. Like this. It's just there's not many places in the world that you can do that. But I think that's one of the things. Like we're always you and I are always online. We're always looking what's the next movies. What's coming out. But you never know. You never know what's what's the big movie studios. What are they going to produce? What's the new animation show they're going to revive? That's I think that's like there's always like there's the what if. That's what keeps me sort of hooked. I think.
Well, you're creatively fearless, mate, and you've had a hell of a career so far, and there's still years ahead. So I'm excited to see what you do. Thanks for making time to join us here on Park Life.
No, I appreciate it, mate. Thanks for having me.
Good to talk to you.
Cheers, mate.
I hope you enjoyed this latest episode. You'll find Park Life on Twitter and me, Michael Croker, on Instagram at Mike_Croker. See you next time.